It's going to sound a little bit ridiculous, but the center of where social anxiety is born from is a sort of self-obsession that doesn't exist in reality. So many times when we're experiencing a lot of hyperfixation on the way people are viewing us, on the way someone's facial expressions look when we're talking to them, the amount of eye contact someone's making with us, whatever it may be, it's more importantly because we think that we are at the center of that person's experience as well. We don't realize that even the anxiety we experience, even that self-deprecating voice that exists in our mind, everyone has that voice. Obviously, it says different things for everyone's different mind, but everyone has that. So everyone's priority and first layer of experience is going to be their experience. So more importantly than them analyzing and judging you is they're more concerned with oftentimes how you are perceiving them. But not just that, that is sort of base level, but also they're more concerned about their inner experience of what's going on. So when someone feels frustrated, sad, anxious, angry, happy, whatever it may be, they're more involved and they're more concerned with their inner world and their inner experience. Maybe they're more concerned about what's going to happen to them in the future or what has occurred to them in the past. Either way, we constantly place ourselves at the center of other people's perceptions, and that's sort of unfair on them and unfair on us. We believe people think about us far more than they actually do. Even the most important people in our lives, we don't think about as much as maybe someone might, with an anxious perception, believe that we think about them. And those small fixations that we do when we're constantly analyzing and constantly thinking and ruminating on how we are being perceived and how that person is viewing us, what does this stem from? So in all of my videos, we always come to a certain root problem, and that is not how do we disable the experience, but before we can extinguish the fire of whatever emotional turmoil we're experiencing, we need to actually find the root of the fear that is first being placed under that fire. And it can be a sort of array of different things. And most of all, it's coming from the perception that we have of what the experience of being judged and being disliked will hold for us. And this is often something that happens when you're not exposed to many, many, many different interactions. What's happening now more than ever is we're spending a lot of time alone. We're spending a lot of time on the internet where we are constantly viewing people and judging them and appropriating likes and comments based on how much we like them as a person. This isn't to the fault of anybody. This is just the nature of, you know, the human mind and how social media is sort of pulling our inner impulses to quote unquote gossip in the form of community, but now it's over social media. So in the tribe, in like a tribal sense, in the past, we would use gossip as a way to connect with another person. We would use sort of talking and communicating and unloading our struggles and our grievances onto another person as a way to bond. But now on social media, it's as if everyone is doing that to a sort of empty void. So we're not receiving any sort of connection. We're not receiving anything back. So we're also not understanding that the world doesn't work like social media. And the world doesn't work like how your mind is trying to convince you that other people believe about you. It doesn't work in the way that everyone is constantly obsessed with hyper analyzing all of your micro movements and the way that you said that word and your tone of voice and how nervous you looked, whatever it may be. Because when people are on social media, they are hyper fixated on whoever is on their screen. But in person, we are much less hyper fixated on the person in front of us and much more concerned with how we are experiencing the present moment and the person in front of us. Actually, I would be willing to bet, and this isn't a, research assumption, but this is more of a hypothesis that people who engage in jobs that require different conversational skills with an array of different people from different environments, constantly sort of having to improvise and adapt to whatever the person in front of them is bringing to the table, I'd be willing to say that we probably see less social anxiety in those people because exposure is not a choice and exposure is no longer something that we have to seek, but rather something that is embedded in our day to day. But this isn't the case for most people. Most people aren't constantly having to work a job or having to do anything where they're constantly being challenged conversationally and with their communication. Because when we're constantly busy and occupied with conversation, our brain actually has to shut up because there's no room for it to sort of input its opinion and hyperanalyze whatever's going on. So, what's the answer? The answer isn't to always seek out being busy, hanging out with whoever makes time or whoever's willing to have a conversation. The answer is not that. The answer is coming to the realization that it's not the fact that there's something wrong with us or you. It's not the fact that you are the version of yourself that your social anxiety is trying to convince you that you are, but rather you've allowed a certain amount of given time for social anxiety to convince you. That's all it is. So there's two ways to go about it. We can go about it through the exposure route, which is we just talk to so many people, we have so many experiences sort of being out in the world and with so many different people that we start to realize that, yeah, nobody really cares that much. Nobody is really obsessing that much. And that's true. That's a fact. Nobody cares that much. And it's 100% true. Even if someone has a passing judgment or a passing negative opinion of you, they will forget it in 5 minutes and move on with their day. Or we can do this from an inner perspective. So now we can treat that social anxiety, that socially anxious voice, we can treat that almost like a comment on Instagram. We cannot give it attention. And by not feeding it, we don't allow it to poison our communication and our relationships with other people. And before I get into that, there's actually something that happens in social anxiety that I think many of us can relate to, and that is a sort of hopelessness and feeling like there is nothing to lose perspective. So someone will go having social anxiety for a while, maybe many years, and they will eventually come to a point where they can't take it anymore. The voice in their mind is so ridiculous, it's hyperanalyzing every situation that they finally say, I really don't give a shit. They finally say, I don't care anymore. Because the voice in my mind is conjuring up all of these opinions and perspectives that seemingly seem to be untrue, but I keep being convinced because of the emotional investment that I'm putting in these thoughts. I would rather just be called names in front of me to be given proof of that socially anxious voice rather than keep listening to it. And what I mean by that is we come to a point where we are so tired of the microanalyzing, we are so tired of the hyperanalysis that we finally say, if that is true, if what my anxious voice is saying is true, then I want to hear it from another person. I want to hear someone else say it to me. And that's when a big shift begins to happen. Because what they're going to find is it doesn't happen. The fears that you have are so hyper specified often, and they've been repeated so many times that you're living in a diluted sense of reality that other people have no idea about. And that's the truth of the matter. So there's multiple ways we can go about it. There's the exposure route, where we keep on exposing ourselves to different conversations with different people, coming to the realization and ingraining the belief stronger and stronger that people are not hyperanalyzing us, people are not constantly judging us, and even if they do, it's a passing thought that they don't really pay any mind to later. Or we deal with that inner voice, which we should be doing anyway. But again, how we act in reality and the experiences that we go through does affect how our mind communicates with us because it's always learning from the way that we're engaging with life. We can treat that socially anxious voice as and in the same way that we treat any other negative thought. And the reason that that socially anxious voice has so much power over many of us is because we believe that because it's more intricate, because it's more specified, and because it can latch on to other people, the unknown of other people, that somehow it's more validated. But that's not true. And that's another disconnection between your awareness and your thoughts. You're taking the thoughts now seriously because they've taken a different form. Why is that? You don't take the thought that you're going to get hit by a bus in the next minute too seriously. So why do you treat this thought more seriously? Because you believe it's more complex, and you believe because it is offering a sort of conjured perspective that could be true of another person. Anything could be true of another person. Someone could think anything. So there's a limitless range. So again, we're not battling with the people themselves. We're not battling with the people around us themselves. We're battling with our own thoughts again. And that's what it comes down to. And that's why exposure is used to sort of negate the power thoughts have over us, because now you're so engaged with reality that reality is occupying more of your attention than your thoughts do. That's why isolation can be dangerous as well. And that's why isolation paired with social media is ultra dangerous. Not ultra dangerous in a sort of way that we can be hurt, but more in a way that it warps our perspective into something that isn't real. People don't think about people that much. People think about themselves. And I don't mean this in a selfish way. I mean this in a, if no one is going to drive the ship, then the ship won't move. You need to pay attention to your own state of being. You need to pay attention to the way you're living your life, the actions and choices you're making. That takes up like 90% of your mental energy. People are constantly either worrying about how they appear or worrying about what's going to happen in the future, worrying about what's going to become of their life, whatever it may be. They don't really have the mental energy to ruminate and judge you for that long. Again, if they do, it's probably a passing thought that they're really not paying that much attention to. Even a nasty Instagram comment or any comment on social media that is not very nice is often just a passing thing for that person. Whatever joy, whatever happiness they're getting out of that, that has nothing to do with you. You allow them to sort of reap what they sow in that regard emotionally. But that's what we're doing. We are believing that we are at the center of another person's mental space. And that's pretty ridiculous when you look at it in hindsight. No one will ever occupy as much room in your mind in a negative way than as much as you do. Because, when we care for someone deeply, they may take up a lot of space in our mind, but they're taking up space in a third person perspective. They're taking up space in the way that we view them from the lens of our perception. We're not constantly hyperanalyzing them in the way that we fear being hyperanalyzed. That's another thing you could look at. Do you do, really, what you fear of others doing to you? That's another issue that we can address, because the more that we judge ourselves, the more we think other people are judging us as well. Again, this comes back to the relationship with our thoughts. Almost everything is a relationship with our thoughts. Almost everything. If we can be free of our thoughts, things become pretty simple. It becomes more of a enjoyment. It becomes more of a what's going to make me have more fun, what's going to make me feel more light, what's going to make me feel like a kid again. But when we're tangled in the web of thoughts, things are so complicated when they don't need to be. This entire video, this entire paradigm can be summed up in the sort of sentence of don't listen to the voice in your mind. And though this is a sort of hyper-specific tangent that the voice in your mind can go on, it's still that same voice. That same voice that is afraid of planes, saying that every plane you're going to go on is going to crash. It's that same voice saying that something horrible is going to happen and that a doomsday event is going to occur in your life. It's that same voice taking on a different form. And we're avoiding the fear of being perceived. But that is the very nature of life. To be perceived is to be alive. To be seen is to be alive. And not to be seen in any certain way, but to be a participant in the game of life, to play in this sort of societal theatrics that we've invested so much time into. Is it real? Not really, but we're all playing into it. Does someone need to see you for you to exist? No. But what an honor it is to be seen in a way that is positive. And what a passing way it is to be seen in a way that is negative. People don't like spending time thinking negatively about others. And I know you might think that's kind of, that's wrong. We live in a society where everyone's always thinking negatively about others, everyone's always spreading hate, and so on and so on. But I think we would be surprised. How much of your day is occupied by really ruminating and thinking about how bad a certain person is? And I don't mean, you know, famous people. I mean people in your life that you see on a day to day. How much are you really thinking about that one guy's eye twitch that you saw and you talked to for a little bit in the elevator? Not really at all. Not at all. How often are you thinking about that person's outfit that you judged when you were, you know, walking down the street? Not really all too often. And it happens, yes, but in the way that we're going to sort of maneuver and conjure our entire lives to avoid this little thing in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of crazy. And we're not avoiding reality. We're not scared of reality. We're simply being convinced and we're believing our thoughts again. It's that same old cycle, that same old loop. You're allowing your thoughts and you're allowing that voice in your mind to go unchecked. And when it goes unchecked, it's just going to keep saying things. It's just going to keep going deeper and seeing what it can get away with if you just keep allowing it to convince you of whatever. That's why people become trapped in anything, any sort of anxious or fearful cycle. It's because they just allow their thoughts to convince them of whatever it may be. They've never been told that they are not their thoughts, so now the voice in their mind has free rein to say absolutely whatever. And when you give your mind that sort of free rein, it doesn't know what to do with itself, because the mind is supposed to be put in check. The mind is supposed to be sort of trained and under a certain discipline. And we can discipline our minds simply by withholding our reactions from engaging with that socially anxious voice. When that voice says that that person is judging you for that little thing, just ignore it. It's not about whether they are or they aren't, because if they are, it's not that big of a deal. And if they aren't, that's probably the reality 90% of the time. And you're under the false belief that finding out if they were judging you is going to give you the reassurance and the comfort that you're looking for, but it's not true. That's only going to make that anxiety worse. By trying to know if that person was judging you, you're going to get a small amount of reassurance. But there's two levels to this. Number one, you don't know if they're telling the truth. Why would anybody tell you straight up that they were judging you? And number two, that fear and that anxiety of being perceived in any certain way is going to come back. And it's going to come back stronger because you keep treating it as a real threat. You keep treating the need to not be judged as a real life, a real life danger when in reality it's an imaginary danger. So it has much less to do with how we're acting. Because how we act, if we're just naturally flowing, if we're just present, if we're just existing, then there's nothing else we can do. If that person was going to judge you for being who you are, they were always going to judge you. So what are we going to do? Trying to find out every single person and what they think about us? Or we create an inner freedom and an inner comfort that we don't really care because it's not that serious and it's not that big of a deal. And that's what the mind loves to do. It starts as a passing thought, and then that imaginary danger gains more and more momentum the more that you sort of seek the reassurance to prove it wrong or seek to logically know that that person isn't judging you. That fear grows and grows and grows until it pops up everywhere and it's constantly being treated as a real threat and real danger to your life, when in reality it's a very small passing thought that was given way too much power. Oh, and of course, you need the bravery to stand still and you need the bravery to walk into a room and not care. That may even be the most important part. But bravery is needed in all aspects. Bravery is needed always. It takes bravery to know that your thoughts are wrong and to prove your thoughts wrong, but they are wrong. And the life that you want and becoming the person that you want, it's simply about embodying the bravery that is needed to sit through the discomfort as you are experiencing reality. Prove your mind wrong. Because your thoughts don't know anything that you do not. They can't tell what that person is thinking about you. And even the people who in the comments may say, but I'm always right about what they think about me, there's a very strong chance that you are experiencing a sort of bias that is going unchecked. There are a couple times, maybe, that what you thought someone else thought about you was right. And it may have been certainly obvious. It might have been very plainly obvious that someone had a problem or whatever else it may be. And you're cherry picking those times out of the maybe hundreds of times you assumed wrong. And the only reason that you're hanging on to those is because you are right. There's nothing we can do in reality except cultivate an inner freedom and detachment and just not care. That is the only way to find any sort of fulfillment in life and not be constantly dragged down by the perception of others. You constantly have to ask yourself, it can all end tomorrow. Who cares? Thank you guys for watching this video. If you're on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, thank you as always. My new book is coming out on Tuesday. So I look forward to that. I look forward to sharing that with you guys. But other than that, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.